I'm Bob Clark. I'm editor of the Overland Journal for the Oregon California Trails Association. And I'm here with Amy McGill, recently retired associate provost at Middlebury College in Vermont. Amy's article in Overland Journal, Oliver Hazard Perry White, West with the Gold Rush, has just received the Merrill Mattis Award for the outstanding article in Overland Journal published in 2022. Congratulations, Amy, and welcome to our Writing the West interview. Listen, I was fascinated by receiving this manuscript from you, and it was great fun working with you in getting it published. Tell me about the article.
Okay, first, let me say thanks and how happy I am to be here and how surprised and thrilled I was to have my article chosen for the Merrill Mattis Award.
I should probably tell our listeners, this letter is, of course, a letter from 49er who's going to California in hopes of digging some gold. And the route that he takes was very unusual in that he didn't follow the usual Oregon-California trail. He instead went on a southern route and ended up in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He was going to go by an opposite direction, and then decided he and his party changed their minds and decided they would, in fact, go to the Oregon-California Trail. So they backtracked up from Santa Fe up to Taos, and then back over the Rockies into Colorado, and then up the front range of the Rockies and meeting up with the Oregon-California Trail.
The article is based on a letter written by my great-great-great-grandmother's brother, whose name was Oliver Hazard Perry White, as he was on his way to California in 1849. So he's the one who really should be receiving this award, since his writing makes up a substantial portion of the article. And those of you who read it or have read it will discover that he was a pretty good writer. I feel as though I just sort of took a sparkling gem and created a setting for it so that other people could appreciate it.
I should tell our listeners that the entire letter is printed in 2 issues of Overland Journal, so it's all accessible there. How did the letter come to you?
Well, the short answer is my dad found it in an old trunk when he was clearing out my grandparents' house, and he thought I'd be interested in it. It was written, as we later figured out, to 2 friends in White's hometown of Covington, Tennessee. We had their names and address on the outside. One of the friends was the owner of the local inn and tavern, and the tone of the letter suggests that it was intended as a kind of a newsletter to all the folks back home, maybe to be read aloud at the tavern over a few beers. I have speculated, although I don't really know, that the original recipients then passed that letter on to White's sister, whose name was Edie Evans, because it includes a request for Edie and her husband to take care of his children if he should fail to return. So I think it had sort of a, maybe not quite a legal, but a quasi-legal testamentary value for her to hang on to.
Did you and those who had the letter before you recognize its importance as a document?
I think my dad and I recognized its importance on some level right away, but honestly, neither of us is a professional historian. Neither of us has any experience with, archival preservation or anything like that. So we didn't really know what to do with it. We also, at that point, didn't know who O.H.P. White was. We didn't know how he was related to us. And we didn't know how that letter got in that trunk. So, any other family members who might have known something more about the letter were gone by the time Dad got around to cleaning out that trunk. So we don't have any idea what they thought.
So how did you start researching this to find out who he was and what this letter was all about?
Well, that was the fun part. I've always been interested in genealogy. And so I started looking for information about my Tipton ancestors, partly because of the letter because I knew the letter came from that side of the family because it was in their trunks, but also because those particular ancestors played a pretty key role in the founding of Tennessee. And so they were really well documented. It was really easy to get information about them. And I hit the jackpot because one of the original leaders of this listserv also happened to be a Tipton descendant and had done a whole bunch of research and was just turned it all over to me, shared it all, was very, very generous with his work. But then the big breakthrough, I still didn't really know who White was. The big breakthrough came with the emergence of Ancestry.com when it was possible to access census data online. And so I was able to figure out who he was and how he was related to me. I found him in the 1950 census in a boarding house in San Francisco. And
1850, right?
I'm sorry, 1850. Yes.
Yeah.
1850. Yes.
Yeah.
And I knew for the first time then that he had actually made it to California alive. We didn't know all this time whether, I mean, that letter might have been the last thing he ever did. As far as
because he wrote the letter from Salt Lake City before he ever got to California.
Yes, he actually wrote it before he got to Salt Lake City, mailed it in Salt Lake City, wrote a brief sort of update postscript around the outside of the, it's not an envelope because it was just folded up paper, but around the outside of the outside. That's how I found him. And then I looked in the 1850 census in Covington, Tennessee, and found his wife and his 4 children, one of whom was named after him. So that made that link, and I figured out how he was related to the rest.
As you were going through this exploration of what the letter was all about and who White was and so on, did you have a sense of where he was and where he was going and what he was trying to do?
Well, actually, the part that took place on the Southern Trail kind of parallels a road I've driven a lot because I've driven back and forth from California to Tennessee a number of times along Route 40, and it kind of passes through the same general area. So I sort of had a sense of that. I had no idea whatsoever what his detour looked like. I just, it was incredibly helpful to have some of the other experts in this area inform this article on that topic because my mind was a blank slate when it came to that. White did describe where he was, but unless you knew what he was talking about, it was very hard to visualize.
The landmarks, many of them had different names at that time. So how are we supposed to pair them up with modern locations? He went through Pueblo, Colorado, but there was nothing in Pueblo when he went through that area. We had a lot of help from Jack and Pat Fletcher and from Lee Whiteley in deciding what route he followed because they're experts on the Cherokee Trail. And the Cherokee Trail was opened in 49, and he was one of the first ones over that trail, we found out, which was just remarkable. Where is the letter now?
I donated it to the California History section of the California State Library because after decades of sitting in my desk drawer, I realized it was completely irresponsible not to have it professionally conserved.
Yeah. Amy, what new insights did you gain as you were doing this research on the letter?
I was really surprised by the sheer volume of material that was available. There were so very many just ordinary people who documented their lives through letters or journals or memoirs, and many of these have been digitized. Clearly, the gold rush and the era of Western immigration captured the imagination of the people who participated in it.
Yes.
And they knew they were part of something extraordinary.
Yeah.
and they wanted to tell their stories. And so I'm hoping that other people will be inspired to, dig up some of those obscure gems that are hiding in the digital world and find ways to bring them to a wider audience.
That's why I love editing this journal, because I get articles like yours that just open up new worlds to me in history of the West. And it was great fun working on it. I'd like to thank you for participating in this interview. It's been great fun. Congratulations on your award. And for those of you who are watching, join OCTA's mission of preserving the trails and the stories. I'm Bob Clark. I'm inviting you to discover your own trail. And thank you, Amy McGill.
Thank you.